Hello and welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 707. I'm Luis Scott-Vargas, one of your co-hosts. This week, Marshall is dealing with some personal stuff, so we're going to give him all our best wishes. Everything's going to turn out as best it can. And I've got a special guest for you. We've got Deathsie, Vincent, but more commonly known as Deathsie. Awesome streamer, a limited aficionado, and a man of the world. Deathsie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Luis. I absolutely love what you and Marshall do. I actually watched and listened to a lot of limited resources a long time ago, even before I was really playing Magic. So yeah, it's been a long time and it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you are calling in here from Bangkok, from Thailand.
Yes, it is. It has been a wonderful life here in Bangkok. I've been living here for about a year now, and I'm able to live like a normal daytime schedule with my nighttime US streaming schedule. So it's been quite the treat here, and there's a lot of food I can eat. So I don't eat meat, so there's a lot of vegetarian Thai option stuff for me. So been living a great life here in Bangkok.
Yeah, it sounds awesome, and you are certainly best known for your stream. I know you're considering branching out into different kinds of content, and we'll certainly get into that. But just right off the top, if you haven't checked out Deathsie's stream on Twitch, he's I think one of the best limited streamers. I'm a big fan, and I have been for a while, even before I kind of got to know you. So really glad you're on the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so on my stream, I like to kind of do something a little bit different. I think a lot of people kind of know me now as sort of like a master memer of sorts, just always trying to find like those F-rated cards and figuring out how to make them work, how to make them playable, or at least give it a good showing. So that's what I like to do. And draft for me is just the best form of playing Magic.
Well, we're certainly excited to dive into your take on draft, Lord of the Rings specifically, and a bunch of questions. As always, this show is brought to you by the patrons of Limited Resources on our Patreon. So we thank each and every one of you for your support. And of course, you got to ask Deathsie a bunch of questions. So we'll definitely get to those. We'll fire it off with one question of the week from a patron, which is from Alexander Pacheco. Is this the first LR episode without Marshall? They asked. I don't know how to feel. Marshall's the consistent foundational rock of my life. I joke, but slightly. Could you, and this is to me actually, could you share your favorite Marshall story? I think, we would all appreciate hearing that. So yeah, this is going to be a good Patreon question of the week to kick things off before we dive into the episode. My favorite Marshall story. I've told this before, but one of the first interactions we ever had with Marshall was he was doing coverage with Nate Price, who ended up going on to work for Wizards. And this is one of the first video coverage Grand Prix. This is Grand Prix Anaheim in 2012 or something. And one of the Magic players was on Twitter was like, who are these guys in the booth? They're like a couple of trained apes. And I've been riding that monkey joke for a decade with Marshall, because right after that, we went on the Magic cruise. We got to know each other. It was the first time we had spent time together, and I filmed the top 8 apes with him. That's what we did. So I'm not one to let a joke go, even if it doesn't have a whole lot. You just gotta, get blood from a rock and wring every little bit of juice on it. So that's certainly one of the first things I think of when I think of Marshall. But all right, let's start with the bigger picture. So Deathsie, how do you approach draft overall? Because I know you have to balance, of course, entertainment. You're a streamer. I mean, sure. I know that entertainment's definitely part of it, but you also are very competitive. I know you like to win. So what is your approach to just draft overall before we get into specific Lord of the Rings stuff?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I figured out very, very early in Magic the Gathering is that I love these weird cards. I love messing around. I'm not as much of a fan of the traditional play styles of creatures and attacking, getting their life total down to 0. But what I also realized very early on is that if your meme cannot win, then it's just a bad meme. You know what I mean? So I had to sort of find ways to make the bad stuff at least serviceable. And this is a bit of a disclaimer, because I feel like a lot of the strategies that I've sort of propagated over the years, so viewers might think like Clear the Mind, or there's like a Heart Piercer Bow back in one of the core sets, or like certain weird mill strategies. Anyway, so all of these actually are these are strategies that I don't really think are repeatable for the general population. If that makes sense. So like a lot of the things I'm doing is actually not very good. But I have sort of figured out how to play them as best as possible. So a lot of that is offset just by like Magic the Gathering understanding, I suppose. But every once in a while I can like draft one of these really weird decks and get them to like a sort of competitive level. So that's sort of my fascination with Magic the Gathering, and I think that I learned a lot of that back in the day from actually players like you, Luis. Players like you, players like Diesel. I used to love watching you guys play. So a lot of that comes from just like, hey, that's the way I want to play Magic, but how could I do it so that I'm actually just not losing all the time?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're a man after my own heart here, where... Because I agree, anyone can take a bunch of cards and make it a joke, but if it's not winning, then it's kind of performance art. Really, it's not really. You want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to draft the weird thing, but you also want it to do somewhat well, even if you know that it's not going to be the ultimate strategy. And there's a lot of do as I say, not as I do when it comes to some of this stuff. But,
yes,
to touch on one of the things you mentioned, for example, like Clear the Mind, right, in one of the Ravnica sets there. Mm-hmm. That I think was a legit strategy. Yeah. It maybe wasn't a legit strategy when you did it a third of your drafts or however many times you did it, right? You were just always in there. But it is, I think, if you did 100 drafts, I always use this example. If you did 100 drafts, how many times should you draft Clear the Mind Control? The answer is definitely not 0, and it might be as high as 10 or 15.
Yep. So
knowing how to do that does make you a better Magic player. And of course, trying to find cards other people don't value and utilize them. I know you're really high on the Goldvein pick, right? In Kaldheim.
Yes, I love that one.
And you were totally right. Like that card, I think, was really good. I remember actually taking a second look at that card because you kept talking about how good it was. And I'm like, all right, let me see. And then I ended up actually drafting that card quite a bit more as a result. So yes, on the one hand, you were trying to do something like kind of weird. Let's see if this works. But it did work, and you don't discover that without doing that. So when you approach a new format, how quickly do you try to dive into the level 2 and level 3 strategies? Like, do you feel like you have to master the kind of fundamentals of that format first?
Yeah, so actually, usually what I like to do is I like to go for the bad stuff first. Like imagine if you're at some sort of like very high class buffet in Vegas or something, and everyone else is going for the oysters, going for like the prime rib or whatever, and I'm just going for like the cheese sticks. Or like, I'm just going for like the garbage first, because I like to kind of do that first, and then later on, if those sort of strategies are not viable, not competitive, and we've seen some formats like that. I think like Phyrexia All Would Be One was a good example of a format that didn't really have that much in terms of cool stuff to do, especially compared to yeah. Oh my gosh, like compared to recent times as well. Recent times Magic has been so good. Like I'm thinking back to Brothers War, Dominaria United, Kaldheim a little bit further back, and I don't know. It almost feels like we live in this day and age where Magic the Gathering sets are so good, and there's just like so much to explore. And so whenever I get hit with a set like Phyrexia All Be One, I feel a little bit defeated. I'm like, oh man, the stuff that I want to play isn't here. But that's kind of the issue I see with Magic as a whole, where it's like there's so many things for different people, but then because of that, everybody plays for a different reason.
Yeah, and sometimes the things that they emphasize in a set aren't the ones you like. I also agree that Phyrexia All Will Be One is my least favorite set of the past 2 years. And they've been on a really hot streak. Like a lot of bangers. I mean, March of the Machines was an awesome set.
So good.
I've been liking Lord of the Rings quite a bit. But that just makes them stand out when there's a Baldur's Gate or whatever, Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, like that core set one or Phyrexia, where it's just like, I really don't want to draft this. Like, and it takes a lot for me not to want to draft a set.
Yeah, same, exactly. And the thing about Phyrexa All Be One is that I actually qualified to both the Pro Tour and the Mythic Championship 2 with that. And I was like the happiest and unhappiest I've ever been at the same time. I was like, wow, this is the one I qualify for out of all of them. You know what I mean? So that was definitely a fun experience. But yeah, it was a lot of mixed emotions there.
Yeah, I know, because you ended up deciding not to attend, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Due to the flight expense and time.
Yeah, it was something like a 16, 17-hour flight or something from Bangkok to Philly. And I was like, it's actually just too expensive and I'd rather just be streaming. So I ended up missing that one. I did play in the Mythic Championship 2, however. Long story short about that is that all Eldrazi essentially just gave me 3 different historic decks. And what I ended up doing was I messed up on the time zones, right? So I actually thought that I had maybe another like 10 hours to submit my deck list. And somehow miraculously, I woke up just right before the actual deadline. So I just submitted like the first deck I saw on the list, which was a Jund deck, you know? And so, you know, I didn't get disqualified. I didn't get a game loss, but I ended up playing this deck that I knew nothing about. I knew nothing about my opponent's decks either. Somehow I managed to get 13th place out of 32 players there, having to play Phyrexa All Be One draft and also Historic, which is a format that I've literally never played before. So yeah, that was quite the experience.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that when you skipped, it made sense, but I was hoping that you would end up going, and maybe we'll see you at one of these sometime, because I think that would be cool. So shifting a little bit to Lord of the Rings itself, kind of what are your thoughts on the format, your big picture thoughts, and then also like, do you have some draft strategies or anything like that you want to share, especially since I know a lot of people are interested in like kind of the offbeat stuff you bring to the table.
Yes, definitely. So first off, I will say that I did sort of buy into this general consensus that this was a set that was not really curated for limited. Like, it wasn't supposed to be the sort of great drafting format, you know, the focus on Lord of the Rings, that sort of collaboration. But what I'm very happy to say is that this set was very much like War of the Spark for me. Whereas like in the beginning, I kind of, you know, really didn't like War of the Spark. And with this set as well, I kind of didn't really like it. I thought that it was quite vanilla. It wasn't as exciting as either March of the Machine or other formats we've had in the past. But it has grown a ton on me. I actually think that this set is fantastic. This Lord of the Rings set. So the more I play, the better it gets. And I would judge it maybe like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 of a draft format for me. Awesome. It keeps on evolving.
What sorts of things have kind of changed your opinion? Like, what do you like about the set?
Yeah, so at first it did feel like black. I mean, I still think black is pretty imbalanced in terms of colors. Black just has the best removal spells, the best commons, and then that basically paired with either red, which you know, most people think Rakdos is the best color combination. I also tend to agree. But as more people started drafting that, there was this almost sort of you know, the self-correction that people talk about in Limited, which I don't always buy into. It almost feels like, to me, almost like a trickle-down theory. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, yeah, well, at a certain point, this draft is going to self-correct itself, and Rakdos is not going to be the best anymore because more people are going to be drafting it. And I was very surprised to find that that was actually true for Lord of the Rings. So what has opened up is a lot of these like sort of slower strategies, and basically what I've been doing is essentially going into a Lord of the Rings draft, assuming I'm already 5 colors. I'm already 5 colors.
We're just starting at 5.
Yeah, we're starting at 5. Yes. So essentially, in Lord of the Rings, my strategy at the moment to have a fun deck, to have a very, very playable deck, and arguably a more powerful deck than you would draft normally, is to go in, assume you're 5 colors, but you're looking for any 2-color base. So you want your deck to be base 2 colors, and then on top of that, you're going to leverage cards like Great Hall of the Citadel, which is a colorless land. It's a colorless land that basically you can tap it and 1 other mana to add any 2 colors, but you can only cast legendaries. So your deck is basically going to be a 5-color deck but it's base 2 colors, and then casting the legendary spells off of Great Hall, and maybe with some other fixings. Sometimes I'll play like a Shire Scarecrow. Sometimes I'll play like a Wizard's Rocket, or if you're base green, even easier. You have many partings to find land as well. So that's generally the way that I like to draft this format, and I found a decent amount of success. I'm trying to push the boundaries even more. But if you just do this a little bit, I think that your win rate in Lord of the Rings will go up.
So one interesting thing you said is you want to base 2 colors. That totally makes sense. But that implies that it's not even always green. Like, you don't have to be base green. Like, you could be base blue-black and then still splashing those other colors.
Yes, exactly. So actually, the way that I look at 5 colors, one of my mottos for a very long time now, maybe five years now, is 5 colors every format. So like, even back in the original Theros, I used to be slamming Opaline Unicorns, as terrible as they were. 3 mana 1/2 tap for 1 mana of any color. It's just like a colorless horse, terribly statted. Actually, a part of that, a bit of a tangent here, part of that is because back in the day, whenever I used to go to my LGS or like my game society at a university to play Magic, it always felt like, I don't know, somewhat unfair. Like, I just wasn't having fun just drafting like a spike and just winning. So what I did instead was I created a stipulation basically for my Magic the Gathering life to just play 5 colors all the time. And so that was how I had a lot more fun at my local game store. And in this format, it is viable, very surprisingly viable, which does not always happen in a format. Like, not every format is going to be as viable with the 5 color strategies, just depending on what's there. And so sometimes I really have to push it, stretch it. But in Lord of the Rings, Great Hall of the Citadel just makes it possible.
Yeah, that card has really risen in my estimation. When you're just playing blue-white legends in your black-green deck off of just those, like, you have 2 of those. So at this point, I mean, I imagine you'd take something like Claim the Precious or Dunlin Crebain over Great Hall. Pick one. Yes, is that still happening?
I think it is correct.
He's thinking about it.
It is correct too, but actually, I do not pack one pick one those. I don't pack one pick those. I actually pack one pick one the Great Halls now because actually the format as it's developing, it kind of reminds me of Kaldheim back then. Like, Kaldheim, like, you could always wheel a Goldvein pick, but at some point they stopped coming back. And I feel like we're getting into that time zone or into that reality where actually the Great Halls are actually not coming back either. So you obviously don't want to pick the Great Hall of Citadel over like crazy bombs or anything, but I do pick them higher than I should be maybe at the moment.
Okay, and then your backup plan, if you don't get some Great Halls or you don't have as many as you want, is the like one-shot Wizard's Rockets or like the maybe Inherited Envelope, like that kind of stuff. How do you feel about the land cyclers? What's your strategy with those?
I think in general, people are playing the land cyclers a little bit too much, if that makes sense. Okay. So I actually like the land cyclers a lot, but really it depends on the nature of your deck. So some of the land cyclers are going to be really good for certain type of decks. Whereas like, so I think the one that stands out to me is the Eagles. It's a 6-mana Eagles. You can plane cycle for 1. That one is a deck that one is a card that you don't really just play in your slow decks as well. Like, your deck also has to be fast. So taking into the context of your deck, I don't think that the Eagles really fits in the vast majority of non-attacking decks. Whereas like maybe the generous Ents, the Ent for 6 mana, that one lets you forest cycle just for 1 mana as well, but it's a defensive card that can work with other strategies. So sometimes you have like Rise of the Witch King.
Or, I love that combo.
Yeah, I love that card. So like, it's not only a card that you can play later and you can mess with your lands, but actually works towards your strategy as well. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. I will say that Lorien Revealed is actually just a great Magic card.
It's the best of those by so much, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. In general, from a design perspective, I like my land cyclers to do more than just be a creature. So Lorien Revealed kind of solves that. But yeah, I think people play the land cyclers a little bit too often, but in general, they are very good and they're better than the March of the Machine ones. I'm a huge fan of like land cycling 1. Land cycling 2 makes games like pretty awkward.
So what is your preferred land count? If you had, let's say, 4 land cyclers, you got 2 Lord Revealed, 2 Generous Ends, your base blue-green or what have you. How many lands are you playing?
So I think it depends on the nature of the deck. So I've had similar situations where I've had like maybe 3 or 4 many partings, the 1 mana fetch a land in green. And I've had all these cyclers, and I've had like maybe other things that help me find a land. There's the 1 mana 1/1 in black. It's called like the Haunt of something. Enters the battlefield, scry 1. Like I might shave more lands because I have those things. But I've also been in situations with a bunch of land cyclers and stuff, and instead of playing like 13, 14 lands, I will still play like my 17 lands just because I think I can use all my mana. So so there hasn't really been like a sort of direct correlation to me. I kind of look more at the nature of the deck to determine how many lands I'm running. But I don't think it's wrong though that people are just doing like 1-for-1 cuts. I think that's also viable too. I'm not sure if it's the best though. I actually don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, your answer is great because it does depend on context. I have had like 14 lands is the lowest I've ever gone, but the problem is if you just 1-for-1 cut, then you just always have to cycle him. And I want to cast my Lorien Revealed. I don't want to cycle him.
Yes, exactly.
So, but I frequently would be like 15 or 16 lands and 3 or 4 land cyclers. So I have like 20 lands. I'm not always having to cast them.
Yep.
But you of course do get to cycle them if you need to. And you don't need to play 18 lands and 4 land cyclers. Like I think that's too many.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it is cool though. I love sets that mess around with the lands. So the last one that I remember strongly was Zendikar Rising with the MDFC lands. You know, the lands that there's like a playable card on the other side. And I think that adds so much to Magic and especially to Limited as well, whereas you have more decisions to make and it's actually just a very fun process to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, all of those were basically land cycling 1, right? You just, the land come into play tapped instead. So it was very, very similar to that. And you got to kind of play a higher land count, not get flooded or screwed as often. I also love it.
Sure.
How are you feeling about the spells decks, like the Fiery Inscription, Pelargir Survivor, Gandalf Sanction, that kind of stuff? Because that doesn't seem like it lines up too well or matches too well with the 5-color strategy.
Yes, that's actually a really good point. You can be base. So I have been base, basically like the blue-red spells deck, but I've also played Great Halls and played all these legendaries and stuff. But I do think that deck, if you can get it, is very strong. So Fiery Inscription and Gandalf Sanction, very powerful cards. There are ways to get back Gandalf Sanctions as well. However, I will say that it feels like at most tables, there may be like one player who can basically draft that deck. So it's not one that I generally go for unless it's just handed to me and I don't have better options. So I am always surprised whenever I see people with that deck because it takes a lot to get into it for me. But I do think it's very strong. I think blue-red in general with, as you mentioned, the Pelargir Survivor. The Pelargir Survivor actually is one of the best cards against the decks that I like to draft. I just like to draft all the dirtly stuff.
Yeah, you just get milled out, right?
Yeah, I just get milled out. Like sometimes I look at my opponent's board, and my opponent's board has like all these crazy legendaries, and I'm looking at the Pelargir Survivor, I'm like, dude, this guy's gonna kill me. Like if my opponent did nothing but just activate Pelargir Survivor for like, I don't know, like 6 turns in a row, I would just be dead because my decks are usually light on removal as well.
Yeah, I think one of the decks I had that I liked the most had 5 of them, and then was blue-black playing spells of every color, just like Rise of the Witch King, Shadow Summoning, Smite the Deathless. It was, and in my last round when I was 6-2, I got milled out by someone else's Pelargir Survivor. So, that is how it ended up. All right, since you like this 5-color deck, give me a kind of rundown. What are your top comments? Like when you. I don't know if you have a list in your head. I actually do know that you do these tier lists. So if you've ever checked Deathsie out on Twitter, he always has a great tier list right at the start of the format. You adapt it throughout the format. It's a really cool thing to take a look at. But what are your top 5 comments? What are you looking for when you're drafting?
Okay, so I think that my top 5 commons, probably number 1 at the moment, is actually Great Hall of the Citadel.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, actually, that's just the best common. I've like pack 1, pick 2'd it. You know what I mean? In like a relatively weakish pack. But outside of that, like removal spells are very important in this format. I do think that the success of a deck is equivalent to just like how many decent answers you have for stuff. And it's a little bit hard because I don't think that there's equality in all the colors, and certain colors like black or red even are just gonna have much better removal spells. But for the 5-color deck, certain cards like Improvised Club are a little bit difficult to use sometimes, which makes it a little bit complicated because I do like Smite the Deathless, you know, just 2 mana, deal 3, just one of the best cards in the set in my opinion. But it's hard to get into that red seat. So usually it's like, you know, everybody wants these spells. Everybody thinks that Rakdos is the best color. So usually the sort of removal spells that end up are stuff like the 2 mana fight spell in green, or like a Hobbit Sting, something like that. The cards that are like really hard to use sometimes in these 5-color decks. But you know, outside of that, top 5 commons. So if I had to pick number 1, it would be Great Hall. Number 2, probably Smite the Deathless. Number 3, it's probably going to be either Claim the Precious or the Crebian.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably as a 5th, I honestly don't know what I would choose as a 5th best common. Maybe like Errand Knight Rider. It's the 3 mana 3/2 in white. That's a card I've really been liking, and also it works.
If you're first picking Great Halls, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly. Like works with the legendaries as well. So I'd be curious to see if your opinions on like the sort of best 5 commons differ that greatly from mine.
I like Claim the Precious, Dunlin Crebain, and Smite. Those are all in my top comments.
Okay.
I think that Glorious Gale is a little weaker than Birthday Present. I really like the Tempted by the Ring. That's actually one of the things I was going to ask you about.
Okay.
So I have Birthday Escape, the 1 mana draw card tempt. I have that somewhere in the top 5. I think that card is just a premium common, just because getting to level 2 on the ring is so strong. And I love Torment of Golem. I know that you've never beaten a Torment of Golem. I know the kind of decks you draft. So
yes,
I actually think that card is unbelievably good.
I also think that card is unbelievably good. It's very reminiscent of what was the version in War the Spark? It was 3 mana, amass 1. Toll of the Invasion.
Right. I don't remember the name, but yeah, that was it.
Yeah, so basically, Torment of Golem is just like a big Toll of the Invasion, and back in War of the Spark, Toll Invasion was actually my number 1 common. Like, actually the best common in the set. Yeah, best common in the set. So, Torment of Golem, really, really good. And yeah, I think that's this format. It's actually very interesting because as the meta shifts, as different things are viable, as like maybe decks are not quite as aggressive anymore in general, like you're not just dying to Rakdos on the play every single game anymore. That a lot of these cards get much, much better. Torment of Golem being very good against the sort of slower decks. Insane.
All right, so since I did allude to it, how have you found Tempted by the Ring? Because if you're playing a 5-color deck, you do technically have access to tempting cards and all the colors, but what's your creature count like? Can you utilize it? What do you think about the mechanic?
I actually think the mechanic is insanely interesting, which I didn't expect it to be, honestly. I kind of expected it to be very similar to Venture into the Dungeon, which I thought Venture into the Dungeon was very fun, but it wasn't like that deep or complex after you played with it a lot. Whereas I think that Tempted by the Ring actually is. It's actually deep, it's complex, and I agree with you. Actually, another way to look at the top commons in the set is actually to look at the cards which tempt you. So both Birthday Escape, as you mentioned, and also the 1 mana black spell, Sam's Desperate Escape, is insanely good in this format. I think that you can just draft decks that are like basically that have cards, cheap cards that say tempted on the ring by it, and you just get there with like random commons and stuff like that. So I think it's very good. In terms of my 5-color decks, I do generally have a lot of temptation because I pick up the uncommon Bilbo Baggins very highly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Bilbo is an awesome card. It basically is like a one-stop shop for temptation, and then sometimes I'll have like the envelope, which also has temptation on it. So my 5-color decks generally have like maybe 12 to 15 creatures, something like that, and 15 is like very high for the amount of creatures I have. It is a little bit harder to tempt, but you generally always find something. Like you'll find something to tempt. You'll be able to protect it or something. I do think that the 5-color strategy is weak to those decks that have like a critical mass of temptation and they're not stumbling with mana or anything. So that's kind of how the meta has developed for me as well.
Yeah, I found that mechanic to be. I was pleasantly surprised by how well the mechanic played and how much it impacted the format. I think one of my favorite decks with that had like 4 of the 1-mana Menace Lancers, Rohirrim Lancers, and like a bunch of like Sam's Desperate Rescues, and you're just like getting up to ring level 4 every game and just going off.
Yeah, it is actually crazy. It's actually crazy, and sometimes like I have lost some games where I had it's a double white rare enchantment. It's called Flowering of the White Tree or something like that. Mm-hmm. And this buffing at my entire board made it impossible for me to block like a 1-attack thing for my opponent. So, you know, you get into these really weird spots where a 1/1 will just end up taking over the game.
So, diving into some questions, some of these do have to do with the format as well. Ryan asks, a lot of people are coming around on drafting green in Lord of the Rings. Well, at the start of the format, it seemed simply unplayable. I know you got in there early already. Do you think this is a self-correction now that the Grixis colors dry up earlier? Or do you think people just are wishing their way up to, wising up to the correct way to draft and build green decks? Like, are people getting better at drafting green decks? And are there cards that pull you towards making green a base color early?
Yeah, so I think the 5-color strategy is a big nod to wanting to be green. You can have a much easier time because sometimes you might just not get the first or even second copy of Great Hall of the Citadel. So you'll have to piece other ways to cast your like crazy 5-color cards. But I don't think that is necessarily a self-correction. I think that there is a small element of that. However, I think that when green is powerful, is when you basically recognize that you have like the sort of engines and the payoffs to be a base green deck. Now what I mean by that is that you can be 5 colors. That's a good reason to be green. Or you can have like maybe 1 or 2 copies of Maria. She's a 2-mana green card. When you attack with her, you make a food. Whenever you attack with 1 or more halflings, you get a food token. And then, so that whole package together with like Mushroom Watchdogs, that makes a very good green deck. Now, the thing is that if you just have random food and you're just playing random food and there's no payoff, there's no reason to play the food, then yeah, your green deck's going to be pretty bad. So I think it's more of an issue of green being just a weird color in the set that is doing specific things and they don't all work well together. So another example is the sort of blue-green mechanic, which is the scry mechanic. So you're supposed to like scry and get these buffs and stuff like that. But most of the time, honestly, I'm never playing any of these cards that are related to scry at all in this format. Because I just don't think that they're good and the payoffs are like very medium. Like you'll get a +1 counter or something. So I think that's more about the weirdness of green in this format and how it meshes with other colors, more so than it being a correction or that green was just underdrafted or anything.
What are some of the food payoffs you like? Because I have struggled to make food work, really.
Sure. So I think that Peregrine is one of the best uncommons. And a lot of the green deck, for me, it relies on having these sort of very core uncommons. So that's either Maria that makes food or Peregrine that if you play like just other token stuff, then you'll randomly get food and you'll be able to get cards off of that. So that has been sort of my experience. But all in all, there aren't that many food payoffs, I think, like outside of just staying alive at the cost of using a lot of mana. That's one of the things I would like to see be different maybe about this format, that there's like more cool ways to integrate food into gameplay. But for the most part, I think that unless it's Mushroom Watchdogs, unless it's Peregrine, or if you have like, I think that there's a rare Sam at 1 green, 1 white that you can sack 3 food and get a historic permanent back from your graveyard, something like that. Without these cards, you don't have much food payoff.
Yeah, so I mean, the food payoffs being higher rarity isn't the biggest problem because people aren't drafting the deck, but I do agree that it's not going to be, without the higher rarity cards, it can be a little tough.
Yeah, exactly. Like my green decks are almost never just all commons decks, which you can see, you know, maybe a Rakdos deck just having all commons and performing very well. Or you can see like a blue-red deck just with the Birthday Escapes doing very, very well with commons. But the green, it does require higher rarity, and it requires you to not get baited by some of these cards like the Scry type cards.
Yeah, I think the Scry deck is pretty bad. Like when the format started, I was like, oh, an R1 second pick, sure, I'll go into it. Now it's just like, are there any commons I can take? Because yeah, it just really doesn't seem to work too well. KFDM has a question. It says, all right, my question is about your thought process around drafting archetypes. When you decide to plant your flag on the strongest color or colors, or when do you decide to plant your flag on the strongest color or colors, knowing there's a good chance they'll be cut? Or when do you decide to go the opposite way and try to go into like the weaker colors? The situation I'm thinking of here is the relative strength of black in Lord of the Rings draft, but there's been plenty of other imbalanced formats, and there will be again. Kind of how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So I will start first here. I think that this whole thing, so like Rakdos is overdrafted right now, right? And I think that one of the things that people don't realize is that you can probably still force Rakdos every single draft. Like, I honestly think so. So it's almost like this sort of over exaggeration or like over expectation of how strongly formats self-correct or like or how open this color is going to be. Like, I'm always a believer that if this red black card is going to be the best card, my best pack one pick one or something, I'm still just going to take it. You know, I'm not going to shy away from it because it's known as the best color or anything like that. And I think people will disagree with that. Maybe at like a Pro Tour draft, that's a little bit different. You need to actually think about like what the other people's strategies are going to be. But in general play, whether it's on Magic Arena or Magic Online, I don't think you need to worry about it too much. But another thing that you could do is actually be open to alternative strategies, such as maybe like 5-color Legends deck, or maybe if you find yourself in a good green seat with the green cards which give you direction, then you can start drafting that. But for the most part, I think that just pick your best colors and draft your best seat is the way that I would go with that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you mentioned the Pro Tour. Going into the March of the Machine Pro Tour, I wanted to draft blue and blue-black specifically really badly. And I decided, and a lot of my team decided, that we would go into blue unless there was a really, really strong reason not to, even if you think it's not that open, because blue was that good. I don't feel quite the same about black in Lord of the Rings. I think that as we've drafted more and understand more about how some of the other decks function, you don't have to be in black every draft, but I still will be happy to start with a black card and just see if it's open, and if it's not open, so be it.
Yeah, so I wanted to get your opinion on that, Luis. Do you actually see black as just miles above all of the other colors in terms of like card quality and taking rarity into account as well?
I think it is the best, definitely. I think that black has both the best commons in terms of like individual common value, but also a pretty deep roster where like the 7th best black common is still pretty good, right? Like, you're like, Claim, Dunlin Crebain, Torment of Golem. Those are all great, but so is Sam's Desperate Rescue, Uruk-hai Berserker, like
Lash of the Balrog,
Lash of the Balrog. Like, it takes a long time before you get to a black card that you're like not happy to take and play in your deck. But I actually sneakily think blue might be the second best color. Because blue doesn't have any standout commons. And in fact, I think the best blue common, Birthday Escape, and like the second best and third best, Glorious Gale and Pellegrini Survivor, are all a lot worse than Smite the Deathless and maybe even Rally at the Hornburg. Like, red has some better commons, but blue has a lot of really good ones. Like, blue has a ton of commons that are very close together in power level, but all quite strong. They're just not like peak commons like some of the other colors.
Yeah.
But I mean, Birthday Escape, Glorious Gale, Pellegrini Survivor, Lorien Revealed, the Land Cycler. You have like Invasion of Orthonk, the, just the time ebb for 4 mana instant speed. Like, Deceive the Messenger, the -3/-0. Like, there are actually a lot of blue commons that I think are pretty good. So I don't think black is like miles ahead of blue and red, and then white. But then I do think it's miles ahead of green. I think green is that much worse. That said, I've drafted green a lot more recently because, kind of like what you said, you do have to look for other avenues because black is being cut now. Like, you can't just get Rakdos. The first, 20 drafts of the format, I was Rakdos like half of them, and then it just kind of dried up.
Yeah, it's very surprising as well. I think that on your comment about Glorious Gale, the 2-mana counterspell of this format, I actually like that card is so good against me. It's
you can never beat a Glorious Gale.
I just can't beat that card. Like both that and Torment of the Golem, it's just impossible to beat. Like you just can't beat it.
those cards are both good, but see, then you got to go next level because Torment of Golem beats Glorious Gale.
Ooh,
like you get to go take their best card, leave them with the Gale, and don't play into it.
Yep,
it's perfect. All right, we got some more questions. Let's see. This is a good one because you've recently, you've won some qualifiers, you've played in some of these competitive events. How do you approach drafting on ladder versus drafting at like a competitive event or like an arena open, one of the higher stakes events?
Ooh, I see. So I think it's actually a very interesting thing because even in the sort of arena open or the qualifiers where you're actually like, I don't know exactly how it works, but I think for the most part, you're drafting with other people who qualified. For the most part, I
believe that's true, yes.
Yeah, so it is interesting because I do think that it is much different than just drafting your normal ladder deck. Like, the drafts are going to feel a lot harder, actually. Like, they are going to feel a lot harder. Less good stuff is going to come by. People will be on to other strategies and stuff as well. However, I will say that from watching drafts at the Pro Tour, okay, so I feel like if I did a Pro Tour draft, I feel like I could actually get away with a lot more. Some of what I've seen from like maybe other pros and stuff drafting at the Pro Tour is that people are like very reluctant to go for the sort of crazy strategies, even if they know it might work. A part of that has to deal with just like the volatility of it, and maybe people haven't been able to test it long enough. But so actually at a Pro Tour at like a really high level event, I feel like I can get away with more. So my decks are probably going to be even crazier. Like
I would love to see that.
Yeah, I don't know. Just like try to wheel like the 5 color cards that I know is going to come back. Actually, like I know it's going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because you do only get the one shot, right? You're just like, all right, am I really going to do this? But, you've played enough competitive events that you kind of know what you're getting into. White Falcon's got it on Twitter has a good question.
Okay.
What do you like or dislike about bonus sheets in Limited? Would you like to see one in every set? Would you like to see fewer of those? Like, where would you land on those?
Wow, that is actually a very good question. I would actually like to hear your opinion on that as well, Luis.
Definitely.
So my perception on the bonus sheets is that I actually love them. I think that it's the best. To me, the bonus sheets is the second best thing that has happened to Magic in the last 5 years. And my number one is actually Companions, which I know that a lot of people hate it, but I feel like they did Companions kind of dirty because Companions are the most fun I've ever had in Magic. And I think that could have been balanced a little bit better. But yeah,
that's an understatement. But from a Limited perspective, I actually think Companions are a slam dunk. They made March of the Machine so much more fun. They made Ikoria so much more fun. Excellent. Just ignore the 60 card decks and then or 80 card decks as it were, and Companions are totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think that a lot of these mechanics are super good, and I think that even though the bonus sheet is not really a mechanic, it every single set that it's been in, even Brothers War with the Mystical Archive artifacts or whatever, it is just amazing for Limited. And I'm actually worried that some of these sets in the future may actually be fun with a bonus sheet, but might not be fun without. So I hope that they do more bonus sheets. So I would like to hear your opinion on a bonus sheets here, Luis.
I love the bonus sheets. I think that they add a lot to draft because I think that there's better and worse ways to pull them off because obviously like what goes onto the bonus sheet could vary wildly and what the themes are.
Mhm.
But I think that one of the things the bonus sheet does that are really cool is it adds a ton of build arounds and depth to the format. Like, again, going back to March of the Machine, adding those 10 companions meant that there's like 7 new archetypes. Because I think a couple of the companions didn't really work. But like a ton of them did. Like, you know, Yorion, Lutri, Garuda, you know, they led you down the path of like, I took one card and now I'm drafting completely differently. Luris was like my favorite card to draft around. It just, you know, like maybe ever. Like just drafting those like Luris decks, and you would never do that without a companion. The companion is what made you do that. Bonus sheets lets them get cards like that into the set for drafters without having to worry about, is this too good for standard? Like they could never reprint Luris, like that obviously can't happen.
Sure.
But by putting it in the bonus sheet, you end up getting this awesome draft experience. So I don't think that I would want a bonus sheet every single set, but I think every other set actually sounds about right. If half the sets had bonus sheets, I would be happy.
Yeah, I think so as well, and I think they've done a great job, and they're getting better with them as well. I was honestly shocked to see March of the Machine have companions, to be honest. But dude, as you said, companions made the draft set so much fun. It was so much better. Like the excitement of picking up an early Yorion or getting past like a Garuda or something and be like, all right, screw the rest of my cards. I'm an even deck, obviously, and we're gonna figure out how to make it work. Just one of the most enjoyable limited experiences that I've had as well.
If I had one criticism, and I actually mentioned this before on the show, I think that the way Brothers War did bonus sheets, where it had all these like artifacts that supplemented the like themes of the set, or Strixhaven with all the spells and the mystical archive, I think that played a little bit better than the March of the Machine ones, just because the March bonus sheet was all legends, and a lot of them were the best cards in the set, right? Like Elish Norn or something like that.
Sure.
I think having the bonus sheet cards be the best set cards in the set that like hang out and play a lot overshadow the set itself a little bit. But that's like such a minor complaint, and I would definitely take a bonus sheet versus not having a bonus sheet.
Yeah, really, really cool what they've done. And there's this sort of strange dichotomy actually for me in Magic the Gathering, specifically limited, as we're talking about here, is that I feel like in the last maybe 5 years, limited has been like the best it's ever been in terms of gameplay for me. But at the same time, there feels to be like less of an emphasis continually on limited. So like as Magic Arena came out, we saw like a few limited things, but it constantly was just pushed off for like its constructed counterparts. So it's a really sort of bittersweet reality for me, where even though limited is getting better and better, there's less of a focus on limited. So I'm not sure how to solve that or anything. I don't have any suggestions, but that's just something that's been on my mind as well.
So I agree with a large part of that, because a lot of the big tournaments and the emphasis on those tournaments is just moving towards more constructed. We just had, 2.5 years of like quarantine tournaments that were online, and they were all constructed. None of them ever had limited. And then, you look at the big tournaments that are more focused that. But on the flip side, we have now every month an arena open, and those are like the best thing to happen to Magic in a long time. And they switch those to all limited. They just don't do constructed arena opens anymore.
Oh,
and
yeah, true.
I think that that's really sick. Like, all I know is when they were like, yep, we're going to do 12 arena opens a year, one a month or whatever. It's like all the limited grinders and like the people who play tons of limited got a little raise, Like you end up getting all this opportunity, and more than just that, it's just you have the ability to play a high stakes event from home and format that's awesome. So I do love the arena opens. I don't want to look past those.
Yes, same as well. And honestly, as a content creator, like I know that you also like to sort of stream them in a similar way that I do. Like I don't like to put on a delay or whatever. Like if somebody cheats, that's life. Like it sucks, but that's life. And just being able to stream these as well and have these events where, all right, I'm on Twitter, checking your Twitter to see if like you qualified with what deck, and to see how you're doing. And I think viewers are the same as well. Like they're going around streams, seeing how people are doing. And it really does feel like there's a sort of rejuvenation and competitive limited there. And I and I strongly agree. I think that is one of the best things that's happened to both Magic Arena and for Limited for a very long time. The Arena Opens.
Yeah, I think they're awesome. Barely Brewers has a question. You know, it's just like, I feel like Deathsie often has different approaches to limited formats than you and Marshall. True. What is your favorite like off meta comment from a recent set? What's your favorite comment that other people didn't like but you loved? Something like Gold Vein pick, but like a more recent pick.
Yeah, a more recent pick. I'm trying to think. So we had Lord of the Rings, and then before that we had Phyrexia. No, sorry, we had March of the Machine. Was there a comment in March of the Machine? Let me check my tier list real quick.
For sure. I'll let you take a look at the tier list. I think for me it's not quite as off meta, but I suspect Pellegrini Survivor is going to be the card I draft the most of compared to maybe like the general public in this set.
Sure, yeah. I think like at the moment for this set, I am valuing Great Hall more highly. Like I will pick that up before probably most people are willing to pick it up. But you know, I do like those like very standout weird cards. In the past, like some of the cards that I've liked a lot in War of the Spark, I really liked like Bulwark Giant. It's just a 6-mana 3/6 enters the battlefield, gain 5 life, and I was drafting decks around that. I like cards like Gold Vein Pick and Kaldheim that like created this sort of weird alternate strategy. And then in a later set in Ravnica Allegiance, Clear the Mind obviously is one that I'm known for. But you know, I can't think of one off the top of my head for March of the Machine. But I do like in general these cards that, you know, people look at it and at first glance they've already judged it. They already have decided it's unplayable. And so I like to have this sort of philosophical approach that I'm not looking at cards and thinking whether they're good or bad. I'm thinking about them in terms of, all right, when are they good? When are they bad? Like, okay, normally this card may be bad, but in certain situations it's going to be very good. So just having a more sort of open-minded approach, and I try to practice that in everyday life as well. So not just Magic.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways to get like, for example, get along with people who are hard to get along with is just look for the positive qualities, look for the upsides.
Exactly.
But obviously, at some point, someone's just a last pick. You know, what are you going to do? Like, you got to cut them from the deck. You know.
Sure. I mean, honestly, Luis, like even when I have to cut a card from a deck, I don't look at it because I'm cutting the card because it's bad. I'm like, all right, this is just not your time. You know, like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So maybe it's like sugarcoating or not, but who knows? Anyways, that's the way I like to do it. So.
All right. Yeah. Let's see. Someone has a great question because I'm actually interested in the answer to this one as well. All right. If there's a pro tour in Bangkok, where do we go to eat and what are we eating?
Honestly, here in Bangkok,
I love vegetarian food, by the way, so I'm totally in.
Oh my gosh! Actually, one of my favorite places here, there is a vegetarian sushi place, and all of my meat eater friends who I take there, they're all like, "Wait, why is this food even better than like most of the meat sushi I've ever had?" So yeah, there's a place here. If viewers are actually interested, it's called Waki Waki. This is not sponsored, by the way. But yeah, so really, really good restaurant. But here in Bangkok, honestly, I think Bangkok has one of the best food in the world. So I have lived in many, many countries, many cities. And I would say that this is like comparable to Vegas without like the sort of Vegas prices. But you can basically find anything here, get anything delivered for like basically, I don't know, like $1. I think the delivery fee is like $1 or something. And yeah, you can get it delivered in like 20 minutes. Basically anything you want, or you can go out to eat. But yeah, if there is a pro tour in Bangkok, or a Magic event in Bangkok, yeah, I'm down. We can all go out and get some food together.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Well, since you actually mentioned like prices in Bangkok and the fact that you lived in a lot of different places, I kind of want to ask you a few questions about streaming. Since you've been a full-time streamer for how long?
Probably a little bit over 4 years now, yeah.
And what kind of led you to make the jump into full-time streaming? I know it's not a decision anyone takes lightly.
Mm-hmm. I think that so before that I was living in England and I was doing like some professional Hearthstone stuff. So I was a professional Hearthstone player while I was living in England. I also did television work. I was the host slash co-host of a long running television show in King's Cross, in London, King's Cross, called The Bridge. So I did that for about 1 year. I think I have like a few hundred hours of live television stuff in my life. And so I was very attached to gaming. My love for Hearthstone kind of died off a bit, and Magic Arena was coming out. And this is actually a story that maybe not many people know, but actually the reason that I got back into Magic the Gathering, like I have honestly quit Magic the Gathering probably like 3 times in my life. Like honestly quit, where it's like, all right, I'm done with this game forever. And the funny thing is that, I don't know, Magic always comes and finds you back.
Hooks
somehow.
you back. And I quit Magic myself. I quit. I didn't play for like 4 years.
Okay.
It's definitely something that you can happen. And but they do a good job of getting you back in.
Yeah, they did a really good job. So it was actually, I'm not sure if viewers will remember, there's a streamer, his name's Show, SJOW. And, he's a good friend of mine, a good friend of others in the community as well. But he invited me on his stream to teach him how to draft because he knew that I was like a big draft aficionado back from our days in Hearthstone together. And so he got me on, and actually what fired me up was that the entire chat was like, dude, this Deathsie guy has no idea what he's talking about. Like, this guy actually has no idea how to play the game. Like, I remember there was a moment where Show and I, we were playing Ixalan, I believe, and opponent plays Elfhame Druid. I believe it's a 2-mana 0/2, taps for any mana. And we have a cast down or something, like a 2-mana kill spell on our side. And chat flamed me for bolting the bird. Actually, like, chat flamed me for killing the mana ramper on turn 2. They were like, why would you use a premium removal spell to kill this thing? And so anyways, long story short, I felt like I had to prove myself. So I started streaming Magic, and a lot of viewers, I think in the beginning, people who watched my stream in the beginning, they stayed there to see, like, basically to flame me, right? And then over time, they're like, whoa, this guy is like doing some weird stuff, but it works.
That's awesome. I did not know that. I'm a big fan of Show. He was actually on Team CFB for a while.
Yes.
I've talked with him a bunch. I hung out with him at one of the Mythic Invitationals. I used to watch his stream all the time because when my son was really young and I was awake during the night, Show would always be streaming Battlegrounds. And I love Battlegrounds, though I haven't played it in a while. Yeah. So I would like watching him play that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, like, a lot of us go back in the Magic the Gathering and streaming world. But that's kind of what got me started. I attribute that to Show. And then, at that point in my life as well, money was hard. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I just try this for a month and a half or like 2 months and just see where it goes? And luckily it did pop off. So I think that there was a lot of luck there in addition to effort as well. But that's
the way of the world. Like, to do well at something, you have to be good at it and get lucky. And the better you are, the less lucky you have to get. But like, if anyone who's successful tells you there's no luck was involved, they're just deluding themselves. Like, I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I 100% agree as well. Yeah, I agree.
So you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to kind of touch on. You said, well, living in Bangkok is great because I get to have a normal day life, but then hit the US like kind of prime streaming market. Talk a little more about that, because that's something I think a lot of viewers might not have thought about, because it's not like streamers just decide, oh, I want to stream these hours because that was work for me. You also have to think about who's watching you and where your audience is.
Yeah, and it's actually been a difficult thing, I think, because back in the day, I used to have a sort of monopoly on nighttime US streaming. So I would say, like, I would normally stream maybe around 7 or 8 p.m. Pacific, and then I'll just stream throughout the night. And there are a lot of people who are up. And a lot of those times as well was during COVID. So, people had more just like random time. People weren't on a normal sleep schedule. So that was actually really good for me. So one of the places I was looking to move to a place, and I was like, well, living in Europe, it's actually impossible to hit this time slot because I would have to be streaming at 4 a.m. in Europe, right? So instead, I was like, well, you know what? Why don't I just move to an Asian country? So now I'm here in Bangkok, and the times line up well. But I will say that the issue of finding your best time slot is that once you do that and you situate your entire life around it, when you want to change it, it's still difficult because I would like to stream earlier these days with people going back to their normal lives and COVID being over. So I would like to stream like maybe afternoon US time instead. But again, I would have to be waking up at like 5 a.m. or something, 5 a.m. here in Bangkok. And it's like a little bit hard to do that consistently. So yeah, there's a lot as a streamer to think about. And that streaming time, the sort of consistency does play a big role for the vast majority of streamers on Twitch, including myself.
Yeah, it looks like you're 13 hours. You're so 14 hours ahead of Pacific time.
Yes,
if I'm doing that right. So yeah, I mean that is a challenge, and you're not the only person who I've talked to. Part of the reason that you, I think, for a long time even had such an advantage in the U.S. like evening market is a lot of the full-time streamers want to stream during the day because that's their job.
Yep.
And then at night spend time with their friends, family, going out, relaxing. So like you able to like kind of like snap up that time slot is obviously really good.
Yeah. And one last thing I will mention about that is that part of that I felt like it was a very big sort of sacrifice in a way where it was like, okay, well, actually this is the best time for me to stream. This is when the most people can watch me and find me and expect me. But then at the same time, I did have to give up like a sort of normal-ish sleep schedule, normal-ish life. But, I don't really have regrets about it. It's just one of the things you have to do if you want to succeed in anything. And honestly, like a lot of people will do it and still not succeed, right? So I feel very fortunate for the sort of following and what I've gotten throughout the years. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's a really healthy attitude to have because a lot of people try to be streamers or YouTubers or what have you and podcasters, and it's tough. There's a lot of people who want to do this. Like this is it's the sort of thing that you have to look for. What are your opportunities? What are your edges? And what are the commons you can get late that no one values? And and trying to figure out the ways to get an edge in that because it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like you and Kenji and Caleb and Voxy don't take each other's audiences exactly. In some ways, it can be complementary, but it's a crowded market. And if you were to start today as a streamer, I mean, if I were to start today as a streamer, if anyone was going to start today, they might not succeed, and it's hard to try to figure out where you land and, finding a niche. Though I do love that you got into streaming out of spite. That is, that's a unique origin story. I had not heard of that.
Yeah, I can't believe it. Like, I honestly can't believe it. It was honestly, there were people in chat and then shows like, hey, this guy's a pro player, right? And I'm like, why does that matter actually? Like, aren't we arguing about like the points here? And then like everyone, anyways, I'm not saying show was mean to me or anything, but it was like, I was like, man, these people are crazy. Like these people have no idea what's going on. I've got to show them, I've got to show them.
Yeah. Well, I think you certainly have. Before we go, is there anything that you want to bring up, mention? You got the mic here. If there's anything you wanted to, of course, I do want to encourage everyone to check out your stream again. Yeah, twitch.tv/Deathsie. Can you spell that for everyone just so they know?
Yeah, so Deathsie is Death SIE, and you'll be able to find me everywhere from Twitter to Twitch, and I'm always on. Or another place you might be able to find me is on Luis's channel. Like I like to watch Luis a lot, and sometimes I'm trolling in the chat a little bit. But yeah,
when the times line up.
Yeah, when the times line up for sure. I think one last thing I wanted to leave us on before maybe you make your last comment here for the outro is that I wish Limited is just going to be more fun, like even though at times I take a step away from Magic and I'm doing some other stuff, whenever new sets come out, whenever there's new things to figure out, I love that. And I think that I will probably love that forever. And I would love to see Magic kind of reciprocate that more, to be more, just have some more excitement, tell a better story for Limited and for the future of Limited. And last but not least, I just appreciate what you do, Luis, here, and also Marshall, who can be with us today. that, I've been watching you guys for a long time. We're on episode 700 something now, and it's been just a fantastic time, and I appreciate being here for the ride. Thank you.
Well, look, it wasn't a tough sell. You're very positive. You're friendly. You like offbeat strategies. You love draft more than anyone I know. Like, I think that you're the perfect fit. So I'm really glad we got to have you on the show. And like I said, check out Deathsie's stream. It's a good time. I think listeners and myself would all encourage you I know you, like I said, we've chatted about you doing other types of content. I think people would love to hear more from you. So just, go on and have a think about that. We'll see what turns up.
Thank you.
That will do it for this week. As always, thanks to all our patrons for supporting the show. We couldn't do it without you. And thanks to Deathsie for coming on the show and bringing us your perspective. I'll have to relook at Great Hall of the Citadel now. I suppose you're right. I actually haven't wheeled that card in a bunch of drafts. Like I used to be able to, but I think too many people have kind of caught on at this point. And
how dare they?
This certainly won't help. But we will, of course, be back next week. And thanks again for hanging out. We'll see you next time. All right. For our sign off today, actually, this is both aimed at the listeners, but also at you, because I wanted to talk about team draft. Is that something you've done any of?
I actually have never done a team draft, but that's the thing that I've wanted to do the most. Yeah.
Okay, so there's two things. One is I'm going to send you an invite to our Team Draft Discord, and you can start to check it out because I think that you would have a good time. The second, I want to kind of run through A, what kind of team draft is, and B, some of the common records and kind of how you feel about them because it's kind of funny.
Okay.
So the classic team draft is the 3-on-3. So you sit alternating, right? So like if we were on different teams, it'd be like me passing to you, passing to Marshall, like, or in the lords versus resources, right? We just like alternate. Yeah. And you draft your deck and then you play each person on the opposite team. So there's 9 rounds total, and the team that gets 5 wins. There's no ties, right? Because it's an odd number of rounds. Tons of strategy. That's a whole different topic. We're not really even going to touch on that. But I think part of the reason you'd like it is it's a whole new aspect of Limited to discover because it adds a completely different layer. Like hate drafting becomes a very real thing and all that. But I wanted to talk about the records you can have in team draft because there's actually just not that many different combinations, right? Okay. So one is the 3-0 ship, and that's when you go 3-0 and your teammates get 0 or 1 wins combined. So you lose the draft, and you got to pay the other team if you're drafting for stakes or whatever. So the 3-0 ship, and in that case, you're allowed to complain. You went 3-0. You did the max number of wins. Your teammates didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So you get to complain, and that's like the most justified. So on the one hand, you're happy. You 3-0, and obviously, like, you got to be happy about that. On the other hand, you don't like losing. No one does. And you lost. Then there's like kind of the middle records. Like you go 2-1, your teammate goes 2-1, your last teammate goes 1-2. Okay, you won the draft. No one really, dragged the team down. Going 1-2 isn't great, but the other 2 people went 2-1. No one can really say too much. And there you feel fine. You feel even better when you go 1-2 and the team wins. Because if you go 1-2 and they both go 2-1, you're like, I didn't do that much worse than you. Our team won. Everything's good. Here's the disaster scenario is you go 1-2, your other teammate goes 1-2, but then your last teammate goes 3-0. So you actually win, but then you know that the one teammate, your teammate who carried you, like they get all the credit. And actually, I just did the Cube Invitational, and it was a 3-on-3, and it was me, Eli Cassis, and Luis Salvato against the team handshake. So Nathan Stoyer, Mental Misstep Stefan, and Carl Serap, Terabad. Me and Ely both went 1-2. Luis Salvato 3-0'd, so it's like he carried the whole draft. Here's one thing, though. If you go 2-1 and your team loses because someone went 0-3 or whatever, the rule is, and this is obviously unofficial, you don't get to complain. You didn't go 3-0. So whenever I go 2-1 and we lose the draft, yes, I'm disappointed. I would hope my teammates would have done better, but I didn't 3-0. I could have done better. So, you don't have that like moral high ground there. You gotta like, really go 3-0 in order to get the full complaint equity. And then there's by far the best feeling, the 0-3 and your team wins the draft. When you go 0-3 and your teammates get 5 wins combined, then it's just like, what did I do to deserve this? I didn't win a single match. I showed up. I was just completely dead at the table, and my teammates carried me all the way to victory. It's like you're a king in one of those chairs, that were or with all the guys carrying them. So, there's only 4 records you can have in a team draft, and most of the time it's going to be 2-1 or 1-2. But sometimes when you 3-0, something good things happen. Sometimes when you 0-3, even better things can happen. So there's a lot of variation there.
That's awesome. Honestly, that's how when you go 0-3 and then you get invited back next time. That's how they're your true homies. You know what I mean?
Oh man, trust me. I've had these long weekends, because back when I played at the Pro Tour, but never did well at the Pro Tour, I would always just spend the rest of the weekend drafting. And when you have a string of 3 drafts where one of your teammates goes 0-3, 1-2, 0-3, you're just side eyeing man, I know you're my boy, but maybe we look for a different third. But you got to stick with them, because if you kick them off the team, the next draft they're going to 3-0 against you, and then it's just over.
Yeah. Honestly, so even though I haven't played any sort of team draft or team sealed, honestly, I might be more interested in team sealed to begin with, because that sounds really fun as well. But yeah, even though I haven't done that, I do imagine in my mind that there are certain players who I'm going to have a better time with, win or lose, if that makes sense. Where it's where it's you know what, I'm down to just go, draft the craziest decks. Maybe for example, it's me day 9 and I don't know, you or some of one of our other friends who are just, they're to sort of dick around. And if we win, that's fine. But that sounds exciting to me. Maybe even just going to some sort of team sealed event and even just, not maybe nobody gets a single win. That still sounds super fun to me. But yeah,
well,
I love
teams
it.
is the best. Team sealed's awesome. Team draft is awesome. And we'll see if we can get you into one of those.
Yeah, let's go.